Hello, welcome back to TSC Talks, the podcast where we talk about tuberous sclerosis complex and other related issues such as intellectual and developmental disabilities and autism. My name is Jill Woodworth and I am your host. Thanks so much for tuning in. On today's podcast, my guest is the phenomenal Dena Hook. I'm going to read through her qualifications because I can't memorize them all. They're too lengthy. We had a wonderful chat. Talked for almost 2 hours, so I'm breaking this podcast episode down into chunks. This is part 1. Dena is the Vice President of Support Services. She's been an educational advocate for more than 25 years. She served as the Technical Assistant Coordinator to the National Parent Training and Information Center, PACER, for over 6 years, training educational advocates throughout the country. Dena worked with the Office of Special Education Programs, OSEP, during the reauthorization of the Individuals with Disabilities Act in 1997. She's a published author through incentive publication authoring, success with IEPs, and an IEP writing tool for teachers and school administrators. During her time as CEO of Family and Children First, she ran Part C of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Early Childhood Program, Truancy Mediation, and Strengthening Families, a mental health and drug addiction program for Marion County in Ohio. She's certified as a special education mediator through the Juvenile Justice Center of Atlanta and as a truancy mediator through the Ohio Supreme Court. That is who I interviewed. She, as I mentioned, she's a phenomenal contributor to the TS Alliance and to the lives of so many of us. I'll just kind of walk you through my first, well, not my first, but the most impressionable experience I had with Dena was when I was going to start working as a volunteer as a dependent adult transition resource coordinator in Massachusetts. I had to do an interview or a phone call with Dena where she wanted me to tell my story. So I called her up or she called me, I don't remember exactly. She was the first person that is a professional, that I told my entire story, whatever we want to call our stories, from the very beginning of the intersection of TSC within my life to current day. Cried a lot, laughed a lot, just felt really received. And this is kind of who Dena is. Was thrilled that she was willing to do the interview. And I'm going to stop talking so you can listen to Dena. So this is part 1 of probably several more episodes for sure. Again, thanks for being out there and listening to us. Take it away, Dena.
Thanks, Dena, for being on the podcast. And I have kind of gotten to know you over the last few years since I started volunteering and just have been really warmed by your presence there. And as a parent caregiver, I think, and dealing with hand and stuff, having someone at the other end of the line that's going to listen to whatever you have to say is worth a million. So I just want to tell you that was one of my, earlier interactions with you where I told you my story and I felt like a weight was off my back. So that's my hats off to you. And I'm going to turn it over and say, why don't you just tell me a little bit about, what you do, your position.
Well, first of all, thank you. If I relieved your stress in any way, then I did my job, and I'm happy that I could help in any way that I could. So my job at the TS Alliance is I'm Vice President of Support Services. So when I came on board, there was community alliances, not as many as we have now, but there were no specific programs in place.
Wow.
And so Kari, the visionary that she is, she's amazing. I had presented at the national conference, would be 13, almost 14 years ago now. I had written a book on success with IEPs and working with school systems, and I had developed an IEP writing tools for educators. One of the things that I did is I had advocated for a young lady with tuberous sclerosis, and it was her parent, that her mother, who recommended me to speak on professional parents working together in the educational system. So after I presented, Corey came up to me and she said, we're thinking about possibly doing more programming. Would you be interested in a job? Not right now, but later on down the road. And I said, yeah, because at that time I really was ready for a change. And a year later, I was in Silver Spring, Maryland. That's how quickly it happened. Yeah. Corey is a go-getter. She has a vision and nothing stops her.
That's the impression I got. And I did a lot when I interviewed her. I did as much reading as I could on her background. And yeah.
She's amazing. She's amazing. Nobody works harder than she does. We aspire to be like her, to do what she does, because she absolutely loves the TSC community and she is committed for life, and she's been with the TS Alliance now for 18 years.
Yeah,
she's not going anywhere. She's not going anywhere.
Oh, thank goodness. I mean, it feels like a family, and she leads. That's exactly the impression I got just from my interaction with her. That she's had a personal lived experience that's so relatable for someone that doesn't have a child impacted. Right. And it's really not necessary. I never would think that. Just from a leadership perspective, yeah.
Yeah, she's pretty awesome. She's a great boss, trust me.
And that's the other thing. Like, everybody seems to like her. So, I'm like observing the whole organization. I'm like, gosh, I don't get like bad vibes or like negativity. So.
Oh, no. We all truly love each other. This is the best staff. And I've had a few years experience under my belt that I have worked with. We are truly a family, and everybody on that staff is truly dedicated to the community. And of course, many of our staff are actually parents of children with TS. So, and we're all family. So it's pretty awesome. It's a great way to exit my career, for sure.
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of the next part on the horizon for you. Before I let you go there, can you just tell me a little bit, about your life, whatever you want to share, but fill me in, whatever you can.
Okay. So I have a son, my baby, that has a severe learning disability. He's severely dyslexic, and I had to advocate to get the public school system to actually even evaluate him. And it was something that was eye-opening for me. And because my other two older children didn't have any issues in school. And he was in first grade, and the teacher called me and said, we have a problem. And I said, what do you mean we have a problem? And she said, he got good grades, kindergarten, first grade, no problem. She would read the stories to the kids before they would be reading back, and my son would actually memorize it word for word, and he could not read. And in fact, went into middle school as a non-reader. He was reading at a first grade 7th month reading level when he went into middle school, because back then, they didn't have to progress in the general ed curriculum. They had to be in the building, not necessarily with the peers.
That's a really good way to put it, in the building.
Just in the building, down behind the furnace and all of that. So I, had to advocate for him to get services. And then the Parent Training and Information Center in Ohio, the Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities, was looking for a service coordinator. And I was working at Human Services in Marion County. And
So you're from Ohio?
I am originally from Ohio. Yes, I am. Yeah. So anybody that was having trouble at the school, there at Human Services, they would send them to my office.
Wow.
You can go down and talk to Dena. And so I was doing advocacy at Human Services, and the position opened, and it was like, this was my passion. If I can make it better for a child so that they didn't go into middle school as non-reader, that we could actually make a difference. That was something that I truly wanted to do. And I interviewed and got the position, and then I worked my way up to statewide training coordinator. So I started training advocates throughout Ohio. We had 25 advocates across the state, and I would train them and work with them to go into IEP meetings.
And how did you do that? How did you train them? I mean, what was available? Did you put that together yourself?
Yes. I put all the programs, I put them together, and it was really easy for me because I put a training together how I would want it.
Based on your son's experience.
Exactly. You know, I came in with zero experience, so I had to learn the law.
That must have been terrifying.
It was.
Or not. Maybe you didn't know.
You know, I think I was just so engrossed in making a difference and making a difference for my son that I was just, I was going to change the world. Back then, I was going to change the world. So then the coalition then became part of the National Parent Training and Information Center. PACER Center was the national. And we actually were the Midwest op. I ended up becoming the training coordinator for the 14 Midwest states in the United States. So I actually went out and trained Parent Training and Information Center boards and advocates and how to advocate, how to develop programs, how to make sure that your advocates have the support they need, how to, what kind of paperwork did you put in place to make sure that you're covering yourself legally, those type of things.
This was national?
This was national.
The PACER Center.
PACER Center. They're no longer the National Parent Training and Information Center, but they were at that time. And that was back in 97 when the reauthorization of the Individual with Disability Education Act. So because I was national, got to work with the Office of Special Education Programs, OSIP, in the development of the reauthorization of IDEA. So I actually went to the Hill, lobbied to get changes in IDEA. One of the changes would be, and I actually went to a hearing and presented on how important it is. I did, for children who are in special education, not to just be exposed to it, but to actually progress in it. And my son's experience was there was no reason why he couldn't learn language. He could have learned what a noun, a verb, an adjective, sentence structure. He could have learned all of that.
Yes.
Even though he couldn't read. But because he was never exposed to the general ed curriculum, once we did get the reading and it started clicking for him.
When he cracked the code.
I had all this Swiss cheese. But I'm happy to say, he lives independently.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry. You said you had all this what?
Swiss cheese.
Yes.
He had
yes. That's what.
Learning.
Yes, I can relate. With my kids.
Yeah. Because they weren't exposed to the general ed curriculum. They were stuck in those resource rooms all day. They didn't, inclusion not even heard of back then. Even for children with learning disabilities, they were segregated. So I got to be part of the reauthorization of IDEA and actually went out and talked to school systems. And I remember that like it was yesterday. Our executive director and we were up on a stage and we had an audience of at least 500 of administrators, special ed teachers. We were in Columbus, Ohio, presenting to the school systems the reauthorization of IDEA and what those changes meant. And when we got to the part that children with disabilities not only got in the building, in the classroom, but they also had to be taught the general ed curriculum. Oh my gosh. I thought we were going to be tarred and feathered. It was
really?
We can't do that. There's no way. You can't.
Oh my goodness.
It was.
Like they actually during you could hear they vocalizing.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Very vocalized, and how unacceptable that was, and how did we expect them to do that? And it was and that will be a memory that will be with me forever. Also, the discipline policy and IDEA changed so that
that's 97.
Yeah, 97 was huge they had to be included in state assessments. I remember Johnny was in middle school and the school psychologist was presenting to parents at the end of the year. And I remember she looked down at me and she said, you don't have to worry about that. John's special ed, so he won't have to take state assessments. And after illegal. You can't do that. You can't single anybody out. But anyway, afterwards, of course, she thought she was my best friend. But anyway, afterwards, I went up and I said, first of all, don't ever do that to another parent. And number